Welcome to another episode of the Smart Real Estate Coach podcast, your source for actionable real-life examples and advice to help you move to the next level of investing. Each week, we help you make a quantum leap in your business, your finances, and/or your life. We want to help you take back control, help you thrive during chaos, and lead you through the current crisis to a better tomorrow. For more resources, check out smartrealestatecoach.com and be sure to give us a rating and review on your favorite platform.
Good morning and welcome, wicked smart listeners. It's Chris Pre, your host again for another amazing episode. Today I'm going to hang out with, spend some time with Dr. Axel Meierhoefer. Now, I love a bunch of things here, and you're going to hear that as we peel back the onion a bit. He's an Air Force vet, turned real estate investor and mentor. I love vets, period. So if you're a veteran out there, thank you for your service. And then I looked at some of the things he's done. And I said, okay, this is a no-brainer. Let's get him on the show. He continues to build his real estate portfolio, and he continues leveraging just 20% of his own money. Now, although he's not doing 0% of his own money, he's doing 20% of his own money. And the ideal wealth grower, he's trademarked that, the ideal wealth grower strategy. So we're going to peel that back a little bit for you. He now owns multiple properties in different countries and different states. He's in, like, for example, he's in Ohio, he's in Idaho, he's in Illinois, Florida, Belize, Panama, Spain. You'll hear some more as we talk. And he mentors people working towards their time freedom point. So you guys have heard me scream for ages about leaving your W-2. And here we are sitting, roughly speaking, at the beginning of June. My solo cast comes out in a week or two. I forget what day it is. And you're going to want to hear that if you're looking to exit your W-2. So I wanted to kind of make June the half-year point where you're getting hit by some great examples, Dr. Axel, and some great solo cast for me, so you can get yourself best tuned for the rest of 25 and into 26.
Okay, Dr. Axel, with that as a little backdrop, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for having me. Awesome.
Good to hang out as always. And for the wicked smart listener to know, we want to make sure that they are jumping over to your podcast that I've been on. So if you want to mention how to find that and the name of that, please, again, just to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, absolutely. We are basically on all the common platforms on Google and Apple and Spotify and so forth. And the show is called The Ideal Investor Show.
Love it. So aside from just my 2-minute intro there, kind of update the wicked smart listeners. I always call it behind the green curtain, kind of how you landed here. And then let's talk about what you're doing now. But I do have some particular questions after you get through that, General.
Yeah, I mean, as far as where we landed is one thing that has happened based partially on the market, but also by the requests of our clients in the mentoring program, is that we have created way more new relationships for people to invest in real estate. We used to have an emphasis in the kind of like Ohio, Idaho area that were, and I know you remember this, like 5-10 years ago, those were the markets that were well performing. One new area that we got into now is Wyoming, because of a turnkey provider contact that we have now. And a lot of people, I think it's kind of like almost a little bit like a secret for long-term buy and hold to use Wyoming, especially on the border towards Utah, because there's a lot going on there. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that we have worked our way in the last few years since you and I spoke is to have a little bit more diversity of offerings, right? We used to do the traditional turnkey, you buy a single family and you own it and you have it rented and so forth. Now we are connected to an organization called PadSplit, for example. If you have a property and you want to rent the rooms and in combination with bathrooms by the room, this, if you're interested, I can explain why this is potentially interesting both for an investor and for the and those kind of
do that. What's the company again, Axel, too? So they have that. What's that company name?
It's called PadSplit. PAD split. The idea here is, if you really look at how does it look on the tenant side these days, most apartment organizations that you would go to, and I mean, you and I wouldn't, but if we were like a few years younger and we wanted to get an apartment, you would go to them and they would say, well, show me your pay stub or something like that. And they want to see that you make 3 times the rent. Well, but if you're relatively fresh out of school or out of college and you don't have this like extraordinary job right off the bat, and oftentimes either not a good one or no credit history, how do you actually get started? And so what PadSplit basically says is, okay, instead of renting a full apartment, you're renting a bedroom-bathroom combination in like a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house, like a single-family home. They do everything. They're basically finding the people, they're collecting the money, they do the property management, they do all the cleaning and what have you. You're basically just providing the property as the investor. But if you think about what they also do, which I find like, and why I'm really like to be connected with them for our investors, is they help these people, these kind of early in life, starting your independence people, to build a credit history. Every monthly payment that they make for this gets reported to the credit agencies and stuff. And they stay typically anywhere between 12 to 24 months. Then they have enough history, then they can show, because one criteria is the income, but the other criteria is what score do you have? Do you have a history of dependability and those kind of things? And so I really like what PadSplit is doing. And they have lately also gotten into some markets where it's just insane, like, Washington, D.C., for example. Unless you're rich already, if you're coming in there and even if you're not in politics, you're just working in any kind of government agency or stuff like that, and you're not there for permanent. Just finding any kind of small studio thing is virtually impossible, and you're not there much anyway. So that's why PadSplit moved in there for these kind of people. So those would be older professionals. They basically just don't want to rent a hotel room for like $5,000 a month. They can rather rent a room with an attached bathroom for $800 a month or $900 a month. Well, then if you think about, you have your 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom bathroom, a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house, right? That could get you $4,000 or $5,000 in rent or more, depending on location, which you would never be able to do on a long-term buy and
conventional. Yeah. I love it. Good nugget there. Talking about that, let's combine two questions here actually with what we've said. One is, you've been buying afar for a long time, not just, as I said in the intro, states, but countries. And now this PadSplit's afar. So how does someone juggle that? Because we get asked all the time. We teach like, okay, get deals within 50-mile radius of you. But people ask all the time, well, how can I do this remotely? Can you just put them at ease, I guess, or give them a comfort level of how you do that and how they possibly could?
Yeah, so our core program, the Idea Wealth core program, is based on working with turnkey providers. And I know that sometimes people purely look on the purchase price of the property, and that is obviously a valid and important variable to look at. But what a turnkey provider really allows, I always describe it in these 3 steps. They find, if you're talking about renovated properties, they find the ugly duckling in a good neighborhood. They purchase it and then have typically a renovation team that renovates it almost down to the studs. Then they have the second group within their organization. It's basically almost like a real estate agency where they put the renovated properties on the platform for sale. Plus, obviously, when they have built a large enough inventory, like one of our partners in Ohio has 900 houses, right? So then there's always some investors who want to sell one, and so they have investor-owned properties plus the ones that they renovate. So they have literally a sales department. And that's who I work with, for example, as one of their contacts, because we don't need agents in the middle. It just costs money in that context. And then the third component, they have a full-fledged property management organization. Now, what does that mean for the investor? They don't have to take the risk of the flipping part. Yes, they pay market rate, but keep in mind, the turnkey provider can only sell something that appraises, because the whole deal is based on a regular financing, 20-25% down, rest is finance. If they were to offer the stuff anything beyond market rate, you wouldn't get the financing. So they know that, and they stay deliberately slightly below that, and they know their market. When you have 400, 500, 900 units under management in a 50-mile radius, you know your market and the value of each property. And then the other thing why I'm at least always advising it as a starting point is, obviously, when your own organization found the place, knows exactly what's wrong with it, created the statement of work for the repairs, did the repairs, then they also enable themselves, and this is the benefit to the investor, to give certain warranties. Like we, for example, never sign deals where the turnkey provider doesn't guarantee that anything they touch in the renovation of the property that breaks in the first year of occupancy is part of the warranty. Right now, you have, obviously, if you put in a new water heater or air conditioner or stuff like that, that stuff comes with warranty anyway. But if they, for example, didn't tighten down a connection and you have a water leak, well, that would be an example for a warranty in this case. And if you take the traditional thing, you go to an agent, you find a property, you're buying it through the agency, title company, now you find property management and they do it, that would never happen. Right? You have to hope that the property is standing on its own 2 feet, so to speak. And if something happens, you have to pay it because nobody will take responsibility. That's basically, in my opinion, I've always argued that way. When people say, well, I could get a similar property for slightly less from a wholesaler or from a flipper or stuff. Yes, maybe true. But you don't get this benefit of knowledge about what is going on with this property and a warranty in the beginning. And I think you and I, anybody who has been in real estate for a while, would admit when you fix something up, or even in a new build, the little things that weren't perfectly done, they show up when it's being used in the first year.
Right.
And so if you have it that way.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, that way, if you have the warranty for the first year, you're pretty safe that everything that was fixed or supposedly fixed, if it wasn't perfectly done, it's going to be good after the year when the tenants have been occupying it.
So is that how I've heard you talk about, okay, you should be able to manage these in, a couple hours a month? Is the main component, the reason that's enabled is because you deal with those companies you just described?
Yeah, in a way, because what ultimately happens, let's say the deal is done now. So what's the next step for an investor? The turnkey provider is obviously either already in the process when you have said, okay, I take this thing under contract. They have no reason, as if the property is done, it can be appraised, so the renovation is fixed. They can immediately start with marketing, right? So you either have a situation that by the time you're closing, the tenant is basically identified and is ready to move in, or it will be moving in very shortly after closing. And the next step for us as investors now is that the organization and all the ones that I work with, they have some tools. They're using Buildium or AppFolio or some kind of management tool where the tenants deposit their rent payments, where the property management organization tracks anything that goes on with the property, where you can see what your owner distributions are. And you can see this, you can basically, if you were kind of like paranoid, you could check into this thing every day at 8 a.m. in the morning. My reality is, and what I teach to my people is, we want to check in a time window when we know the rent should have been collected, the month is basically over. So I always recommend between the 10th and 15th of the month. You see the data there, and then really what you do, and this is why I'm saying I can manage my own portfolio with 10 of those kind of properties in basically an hour a month, is I set up, as soon as I get the official notification, the report is ready for this month. There's always a link to set up a call for 20 minutes. And so I call my contact at the property management organization, but I already looked at the report. So the only thing we talk about for those 20 minutes is, was there anything that didn't make sense? Is there anything upcoming? Like right now they had, in my Ohio thing, they had a thing where they offer lawn mowing deal for any empty properties, right? So if you have an empty one, you can sign for this year and then they mow your lawn for $35, because the city says you have to do this, that kind of stuff. Or in the fall, they had a thing, they got a contract with one of those gutter cleaning companies and I paid for 4 properties under management, $75 to clean all the gutters. Stuff like that, right? So that would be like 5 minutes to talk about that.
Yeah.
But overall, that call is half an hour, 20 minutes at the most. I have like oftentimes a cluster of 4 or 5 properties, so we go through each of them. Then, next day I call the other property management, another 4 or 5. I call the third one and the fourth one. If you add it together, unless something really crazy happens on an average month, I talk maybe an hour and a half to these guys. Yeah,
So what are the worst thing that happened that is it just that it could empty, right? And you got kind of vacancy for a little while. Is that the worst?
No, not really, because if you really look at the life cycle, so to speak, when does something go empty? It either goes empty when you're getting, and we do this, and I encourage everybody who does this, whether you do turnkey or not, to engage with the tenant the first time about the renewal 90 days out, then 60 days out, then 30 days out. So typically at about 60 days, the tenant knows, do we want to renew or not? So
Yeah,
that's why I'm not, because that also at that moment, let's say they say, no, we're going to move somewhere else, whatever reason. Now, at that moment, your property management knows we can start marketing, and oftentimes there isn't really a big break. What needs to be obviously discussed, whether renewal or not, is what should be the new rent, right? Yeah. In both cases. The worst thing that can happen is that I have seen, and that takes a little bit more time, something breaks in a house, and obviously there are all kinds of things that could theoretically break. And you might have a situation, let's say, I give you one example I had. Tenant reports that somehow there's no warm water. Property management sends somebody, they check it, and they say something is broken in the water heater. So now I know, and this is why good record keeping is important, that when I bought that house, on the list of things in the statement of work, water heater new was listed. Right now, obviously, when I have this house in all the places that I have right now, there are no more than 5 or 6 years that I have them. Normally, I always expect the water heater to have 8 to 10 years warranty. I don't want to pay for that. Now that takes a little haggling. Have to go. They have to find when it was. Can they find a receipt? Can they contact the manufacturer? Are they really willing? Then oftentimes they haggle over. Yeah, we give you a new water heater, but we're not paying for taking out the old one and putting in the new one. Right? Then I call them sometimes and say, "Do you understand the meaning of the word warranty?" and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, that's when your call, the monthly call, can go over a little bit longer. What I also teach in our mentoring program is, and I think this is important, I'm very grateful, Chris, that you bring this up. I want our investors to really understand themselves to be the CEO, president, king, queen of their empire, right? And not just say, okay, that sounds kind of funny and cheeky and stuff. No, I mean it in the way, in your attitude and how you actually go about it. So what does that mean? The turnkey provider, the property manager, the inspector, the lender, you name it, all the different entities you deal with, they are equivalent to employees in your company. And they have to understand it's your property, it's your ownership. It's the same thing like any business owner. When you work for somebody and it's their business, and they have a conversation with you that they're disappointed about your performance, you cannot bullshit them. And any owner who would ever allow for the employees to basically run the show, so to speak, and I don't mean this in a dictatorial sense, I'm just saying it needs to be clear who is who and who has which role. And that's, for me, an important thing. So these things, when you only shine the light on for a short moment, is one thing, and you can make up all kinds of scenarios. But what I always encourage, and I'm trying to be the role model for that, is you have a relationship with all these different quote-unquote employees. And as during those times where you have your monthly call, 20 minutes, you make it clear what you're looking for, what you expect them to do, report properly, on their performance and what they did. When this proverbial brown stuff hits the fan, they already know who you are, how you operate, what you are okay with and whatnot. And they treat you accordingly. So this component of how do I get my mindset to be positioned as the leader of my empire, and the people understand I pay them and I have the rightful expectation of performance. When you get that across, a lot of stuff starts going way, way better. Right. And this is, it might sound a little trivial, but you would be surprised, or maybe not you, Chris, but most people would be surprised how little of that is common knowledge or common mindset.
Okay. Who wants to be the next apprentice? Pretty interesting, guys. We started this apprentice program back as a July 4th, 2024 promo. That's where it started. And it was so incredibly effective. We were just going to run it for the summer.
It was so effective immediately, we kept it. It's in place now. And what is it? It allows you to get into the community, the Wicked Smart community, for less dollars than the QLS home study course sells for right now on our site. In fact, when you go to smartrealestatecoach.com/apprentice-pod, apprentice-pod, when you go there, you're going to see that as an apprentice, you're going to get over $13,000 worth of coaching, the possibility for you to touch base with us if you want to 4 or 5 times a week, and it doesn't exist anywhere out there, frankly. That's why we did it. We did it for 2 reasons. One, no one is giving you the support out there. We keep hearing feedback, which is how this was born, that other educators are not giving support. They're just selling stuff. So it doesn't exist anywhere, and nowhere in the real estate education or coaching space. And we want to help you do one thing, deals. So we've wrapped the support mechanism around this. We've allowed you to get into a Slack community with the other associates who previously were protected in Slack, and now you get to jump in there and experience that for 12 weeks. You also get to come to the In the Trenches boot camp, which is private. It's a chance to hang out with the family team and one of the coaches for 2.25 days in our conference room, roll up our sleeves, get calls done, get deals done. If you come with leads, you leave with deals. Absolutely incredible. I could go on and on. Go to the website right now. Check out more information about the apprentice, and I'm going to give you the In the Trenches bootcamp site, because you don't have to become an apprentice. It just happens to be free with apprentice and associate. So 2 links I'm going to give you, super important. smartrealestatecoach.com/ITTB-pod. That's going to give you some information about the bootcamp. If you want to buy a ticket to the bootcamp, it's more expensive, but you can. Just to come check us out. About 1 or 2 people every time we run it do just that. Or become an apprentice, and it's for free. smartrealestatecoach.com/apprentice-pod. No, I agree. I agree, because we have the biggest challenge. I want to see if this is in your program as well. The biggest challenge with every experience level, excuse me, that we have in our company is helping the W-2 background person become that CEO, that leader that you're talking about. Do you also find that you deal the same type of avatar student-wise?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of in a much, much more concise way. I wish I were as concise as you are, Chris, but that's exactly what I'm getting at. But when I say role model in the mentoring program, I typically offer people, regardless on what the topic is, to do any kind of calls with them the first few times. And sometimes, some people are a little bit more self-confident, others are less self-confident, where even the third time they still want me to be there, and maybe they now kind of lead the conversation, but they feel that I need to still be there to protect them or something like that. But the thing is, really, it is an evolution to realize. And oftentimes people with this W-2 starting position are really conditioned to be submissive. Right. And even if they logically and consciously understand, in this case, it is my thing. I paid $150,000 for it. I have an expectation for it. I have been given promises in writing, notarized, what have you. That's all good. You can know that. But are you actually acting and behaving that way? And that is an evolution. And I think that is underestimated value that people like you and I provide to our participants, students, clients, whatever we call them, because it's not just the deal. You're investing in these value assets like real estate for the long term. You're building something. And as you're building that, what you're really building is basically the company, the business of investing.
I agree. And it's our job, not our job. It's one of our roles to help them make that transition, sometimes the toughest of them. Talk about this. So you said earlier, 20%-ish, conventional, they put 20% down, they get the rest financed. How about if there's a Wicked Smart listener thinking, okay, well, I don't necessarily think I would have 20%. Do you suggest they wait? Do you suggest other ways to get to the 20% to fund these deals? Any thoughts around that in general?
Well, for one, I would say, if you don't know how you can be creative about financing deals, go to Chris. That's one thing. But one other thing that we have started to look into, and this is maybe a little bit out of left field, there are organizations, I want to call them, and most of them are banks, but in general, I would call them organizations who understand that when you start a new business, you start your LLC for the purpose of investing, that you typically need some initial funding. One way you can go about this, for example, is to say, okay, I have a certain amount. I would not really ever recommend anybody doing it with zero money. At least I wouldn't know. I know you know how to do this and how to go about it. So that's why I'm very happy to say, if that's your approach or that's how I'm going to do it, we'll do Wicked Smart. But if you say, okay, I'm kind of close, but I'm missing $5,000 or something like that, then one thing that is now available and has been for quite a few years is that you can get basically through your business bank account that comes logically with your LLC. You can approach either your existing bank that you have the account with, or any other bank through, like, for example, Credit Karma, and say, I want a credit card for $5,000 for 2 years, no interest. Right? And if you think about that, we obviously recommend fundamentally that you build a reserve from the positive cash flow that comes out of your investment. But if you have to go that route, then, especially when you have, like I just said earlier, a 1-year warranty, so you don't really have to build the reserve in the first year necessarily, because anything that should happen is anyway covered. You can basically cover this shortfall and then just take what you have in positive cash flow, which, by the way, I should have maybe mentioned that we don't recommend buying anything that doesn't have a positive cash flow. But right, so based on you have positive cash flow, and normally that's only the net after you have put away money for the reserve, but that typically comes to 15% of the rent, and then plus your positive cash flow. If you add that together and you pay that for 18 months, that shortfall should be covered. And it's a good thing too, because whoever that entity is that gave you that credit card that you then use to cover that difference, now will, number one, give you a higher credit line even before you had paid it all back. But it also creates basically a credit score for your business, which can be helpful if you want to do anything other than conventional financing. We do a lot of DSCR and portfolio loans and non-recourse loans and stuff, especially now, where the interest rates are very high, and ultimately they're almost the same unless you go to hard money. So that's, for example, one approach to go if you're short. Now, the other thing, this is a little bit of a twist on this, is what I just explained would be true if you say, I already know which property I want to buy. But what also in our scenario happens, I go to our providers, the turnkey guys we just spoke about, and I say, what do you have available right now? And they say, what are you looking for? And let's say I'm saying I'm looking for something between 150 and 200. And they say, well, that's too bad. I have one for 220. Awesome deal. And here are all the numbers. Do you want to look at it? I could either say, well, not really, because I know if we were to do 220, then I need my client to have 45,000 to pay down, and they really only have 37 right now. But if you apply what I just mentioned, then you can get into that 220 deal that just happens to be available right now, instead of having to wait. Right. So those are some of the scenarios where we can do that, and this is just one way to go. We have not really done any of the core stuff you do with, like, owner financing and so forth, because the turnkey providers typically don't want to go for that.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Before I forget, Axel, we have a free gift for them. Can you tell them what they'll get? And then they can get that at smartrealestatecoach.com/Axel. I don't want to forget to give that out. I appreciate you doing that. What will they receive there? It's a mindset piece.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple of years ago, and I'm very open about that, I realized that a lot of the mentoring that I do, besides working on deals and finding deals and then closing deals with the clients, is this mindset issue. This, what is my role? The stuff we just talked about. And there are a couple of other things also, your relationship to money, the propensity to make emotional decisions rather than rational decisions, that kind of stuff. And I kept saying, I don't know, I'm sure this happens to you and has happened many times. People phrase their issue slightly different, but it ends up you describing and helping them and explaining it over and over and over again. And ultimately, I just decided I make a manual, which is not just describing stuff like you're reading a book, but that has actually activities in it where you say, okay, if you ask yourself this question and you make a little table with this on the left side and that on the right side, list down the things that you would say as an answer. Then in the next step, okay, out of those things, analyze which ones are emotional and which ones are and so forth, right? So literally the mindset manual, when people download that, it gets you and takes you through, and you will kind of almost automatically realize where do you have areas that you can improve, where do you have maybe some limiting beliefs or mind blocks and stuff like that. And I'm not saying I invented all of it myself. I also found when I wrote it, some things, some suggestions that we make. How can you make change? Right? How can you change your habits and stuff? Which is again the same thing, right? Like for example, there's a quick little story. I thought I can get rid of smoking by using these patches, right? Like, I don't know, this is a long time ago, but they had these patches and I looked into it and they said, well, you start out with one that's relatively strong and then a little less strong and a little less strong. So I decided, okay, at the end of 1 year, New Year's resolution, I'm going to do this. So I start with the strong one and get about halfway through. And then I had to go to a trip, like, I don't know, Boston event with Chris or something like that, right? From the West Coast to the East Coast for 1 week. And because that wasn't in my habit of putting these things in, because I had just started, I obviously forgot them. Now, I'm sometimes stubborn. I didn't want to buy a new package, knowing that there was half a package waiting at home. So for a week, I didn't do the patches and I didn't buy any smokes and nothing. So I come on home and tell my wife, man, I can't believe I forgot that package. I really, should get back to that. I put the patch on, almost had a heart attack. Of course, I was clean for a week, and now I put this kind of relatively 1 pack a day cigarette thing on my shoulder. Why am I mentioning this? What are things that you can do and what you shouldn't do? You shouldn't go cold turkey for a week and then put like a package worth of nicotine on your shoulder. But that's part of it, right? Like, how often do you need to check something? I mentioned earlier the AppFolio software, you can theoretically 5 times a day, but the habit should be maybe once a week or at the end of each month. What do you want to check in your bank accounts? What do you want to actually use? Do you want to use any kind of tool that reconciles your stuff? Like, do you want to have QuickBooks for your LLC? And when you do that, you will quickly realize that's not just a good habit for your company. That's actually a good habit for your regular life as a private person as well. Right. And those are the kind of things. So there
a lot of that tool, that mindset tool with that link, and I'll say the link again, has a lot of that, habits, discipline. Yeah. Well, I would say this to the Wicked Smart listener, there's nobody listening that shouldn't get that, right? Because mindset is 99% of what you and I deal with, even though the skill set piece, I always say, is easy. The mindset piece is where the work is. So smartrealestatecoach.com/Axel, guys, you want to get that. Axel, what, because we can go in many different directions, always, you and I. What didn't I ask you that you'd like to make sure we nail down today for the Wicked Smart listeners so we don't leave anything kind of on the table?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned this before we started recording, is, and this is only a realization that I had at the end of last year, that in most cases, when I get a chance to talk to you or more even to your audience, it feels like we're always talking about the novice starting investor. But the reality is, and I know this is also true for you, we have clients, I have clients who started years ago. They went through the 12-month program. They keep investing in properties and stuff like that. They're evolving, and their portfolio of assets, together with their mindset and all these other things, keeps growing. But what that also brings to the table is it smart to keep doing the same or fundamentally same thing on and on and on and on and on? And I wouldn't say there is ever wrong to invest in real estate, but you also want to start looking, when we consider real estate as one of the value assets that are out there, what other things within value assets can you do to diversify your portfolio? So one thing that I, for example, did after I reached my 10th property is to buy some gold and silver. Now, sometimes you're just lucky, right? I don't want to make anybody believe that I knew anything about it. I just knew it is a 5,000-year value asset. I bought in 2020, I think it was, at about $1,500 an ounce. Now it's $3,100. Like, I mean, it sounds like, oh man, you're smart. You'd more than doubled your value in gold, but that's not normal, right? That's just crazy. If you had asked me or told me that there was a chance, I would say no way. But that is one thing where I can say, okay, so I have in my pizza pie, if you want to, is 65% residential real estate. It's about 10% gold and silver, and 10% stocks, and then the rest is kind of like a little bit to clay. And one new thing that we brought on now to clay, and this is mainly for the female listeners, is for to get into what's called investment diamonds. So those are diamonds of, Cartier level quality, but the difference is that they are internationally certified. It's kind of like, you buy gold and it's 99.999% pure and stuff, certified, everything. You can get that exists, and I didn't know until a few years ago that exists as an investment tool. What's cool about that is, I mean, if you wanted to do this for your wife, Chris, you can say, okay, I go to a jeweler, I get 2 nice 1-carat investment diamonds, and then I let the jeweler make nice little earring holdings. So when you and your wife go travel somewhere, she can take those 50 grand on her ears, through any kind of airport scanning system. There's no metal, no nothing. And if you get stuck, if another kind of weird thing like COVID happens and you're stuck wherever you went, you have something that is universally accepted of value, that you can turn back into money if you need it. And it's super tiny, right? Like these things weigh basically.
Yeah.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we have been thinking about for the more established investor, like gold and silver, diamonds, a little bit of stocks, a little bit of, maybe art, and you can go all kinds of different ways. As I said earlier, we only recommend to do this for 5%, but it's really kind of cool because it's also somewhat a tangible way. If you think about my investors or myself, I never see my properties. They're all like way away from where I am, but a diamond or like a little case of gold coins or gold bars, that's something tangible where you can see the assets that you own.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, to keep everybody thinking a little bit outside the box. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Axel, how else can these guys reach you besides that free link we gave them? How else can they reach you? Please share anything you want for them to get in touch with you.
Well, fundamentally, I mean, you can go on Amazon and put in Ideal Wealth Grower and find the book. You can just put Ideal Wealth Grower on the Google machine, as I call it, and it pops up, like our website, our Substack, our newsletter. So just as long as you just put Ideal Wealth Grower, those 3 words, in any kind of search engine, you find us in all kinds of different places. And the one thing, as far as your point, Chris, and getting in touch is, if you go to idealwealthgrower.com, for example, there's a button that says schedule a complimentary discovery call. Because obviously, you do a certain variation of real estate investing. I do a certain variation. There are other colleagues who do a certain variation, and not everything is a perfect fit or a good fit for somebody. So I'm a huge fan of having a conversation first.
I love it. And there's nothing to lose and everything to gain for them. So I appreciate that. idealwealthgrower.com and the free gifts at smartrealestatecoach.com/Axel. Axel's awesome to hang out as always. And the 2 other nuggets for the Wicked Smart listener would be, make sure you go to Amazon and grab his book, because how new is that? When was that released?
It came out end of October.
Yeah, so this is a new book, guys. And also, you'd be remiss not to subscribe to the podcast as well. Not because I was on it a couple times, because he's approaching, I think, 500 episodes, aren't you?
Yeah, 455 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got similar podcasts, guys. Go ahead and subscribe to that. Make that part of your listening tools and mindset tools and real estate tools. Axel, it's great to have you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, Chris, wonderful. And maybe in a few years or so, we do it again.
We absolutely will. We'll do an encore.
Right.
Okay, Wicked Smart listeners, that wraps up another Wicked Smart Masters class. I want to give you guys a gift today. If you'd like to have a Wicked Smart t-shirt, especially with the QLS live event coming up in Boston, we want to ship you one. Now, I might be opening a can of worms here, but what I ask you to do is send an email to support@smartrealestatecoach.com with your shipping address and the size t-shirt, and you're going to get a Wicked Smart black t-shirt, and I would invite you to wear it at the event. You just go to qlslive.com for more info on that. Support at smartrealestatecoach.com, your address that we can ship a free shirt to, and the size that you prefer, and your Wicked Smart shirt is on the way, and you are Wicked Smart. See you at the QLS Live event in October. qlslive.com.
Hey guys, are you simply sick of juggling a dozen different software tools for your real estate business? I know I was, and I know I'm not a tech person, so it was frustrating. A subscription for this, you got a subscription for that, and they don't even work together out of the box. That's very frustrating, especially in the real estate world where your best time spent is going to be out in the field or on the phone with sellers. And now you're stuck hiring a tech guru just to make all that sync up. So let's ditch the chaos and let REI Black Book handle everything. Automate your lead follow-up, track every deal, analyze things quickly for you, make offers all in one platform. In fact, with the Wicked Smart platform, we now have access, if you're in the Wicked Smart community, to all the other associates' properties. Can you imagine that? So you're brand new in the business perhaps, and your seller looks on your website and sees 20, 30, 40 properties, instant credibility. So you're going to get everything on REI Black Book from our custom workflows for lead generation all the way to closing. It has it covered. Try it today for just $1, guys. Visit smartrealestatecoach.com/REIBB-DD. smartrealestatecoach.com/REI, B as in boy, B as in boy, hyphen, D as in dog, D as in dog. All right, thanks for tuning in to the Smart Real Estate Coach podcast. If you got value from today's episode, guys, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a future episode. It literally takes one nugget to access some of the things we're doing. And when you're talking the size rather of the paydays, it's an opportunity cost that you can't let go. So don't miss an episode. And for goodness sake, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you're ready to find your best path for getting started on your real estate investing journey in general, head over to smartrealestatecoach.com/get started. We're going to help you take the guesswork out of your next steps. See you in the next episode.